So what I want to share that I believe will help people is my story on domestic violence. Um, so about back in 2017, I had got married. And before I got married, I was talking to this guy. Met him on the internet. Really didn't know him that long, but I guess I was caught on because I came from a really big family. Um, my mom always kind of told us that, don't settle for just the girlfriend status, you're a wife. So she raised us as that. So I guess I never really understood like what the everything else behind it. So I went in my relationships and I want to be a wife. That was my starting, point. And so I was previously in a relationship and things we were in there for a while and things didn't go as planned. We ended up going our separate ways. And I met this guy and, we were talking, we hit it off pretty well. And, made it clear I wanted to be married. And he was like, well, me too. So I was telling my mom and I was nervous because my mom, if you see her, she can be pretty intimidating. So I was like, I don't want to tell her this because I know she's probably going to say something against it. And I really don't want to hear it. So I eventually went to her and told her. And she was like, what's the guy's name? And, she wanted to do a background check. She wanted to know a little bit more about him. And because at the time I think I wanted to move a little faster, it didn't really give them a chance to really get to know him that well. And so at the time I was really headstrong because I was sheltered most of my life, and I really wanted to kind of get out and see what life was about. Like my parents were strict on us, but I appreciate it now. But you went to work, you came home, went to school, and came right back home. There was no, you know. So I wanted to see what life was about. I ended up moving out, and I moved to him. And I want to say there was some warnings that my mom had gave me before I left, and she told me, there's some things that we see we're concerned about. You might want to just give it more time. And I was just like, no. My mom was already made up. I ended up leaving. I quit both of my jobs, and I moved to another city where I didn't know anybody but him. And she was like, oh no, it's some things that we see, that are concerning for your safety. And I was just like, that's old stuff. My mind was at 21, that he's changed. He wasn't saved, but he was changed. And that was in his past. I was like, I want to give him a chance. That's what I believe, at the time. And it was not long after we had got married that the physical abuse had started. It was maybe, I want to say, about a couple months later it started. And when it started, I didn't tell anybody. I think I was hurt because coming from a home that was, your loved and your you've sheltered. It was a big shock for me um, to experience that. And it laid on me for years. It laid on me for years. And so when I finally got to the point, I didn't really have to even say anything to my mom because she already knew. She already saw some things in the spirit already that were going to happen. And I remember one day she called me and she said, I got to tell you something. And at the time, I wasn't level headed at all. I would get very irritated, especially when we spoke of my spouse. Like, she never said anything negative, but she would tell me things that were going to happen. And she was like, well, I just want to tell you this. Just listen to me. She said, I had a dream about you. You were in a swimming pool or something like that. And she said, next thing you know, out of nowhere, this killer whale came out of nowhere and it was coming after you. And she said, you were in this water and you were just swimming as hard as you could. And no matter how far, like fast you were swimming, this whale was coming after you. And before it could shut its mouth on me, she opened her eyes up. She told me that. And I was just like, okay, and I didn't want to show how I felt on the phone because I'm like, I was very prideful at the time. But I felt a little overwhelmed by that at the time. And I was just like, well, I don't know what that means, but I know what I'm going through right now. So it has to have some type of meaning. So, like I said, once the physical abuse had started, there was also some mental and other types of sexual abuse that went on as well. And I carried it for a while. And what would happen is he would go to work and I would be home alone all day. He didn't want me to work. I was isolated to myself. My family was about an hour away. And I just had a lot of time to think. And in my thinking, the devil would play tricks on my mind. And he would have me sitting there, and it was like my brain was replaying those moments. And I started to feel like I was just going crazy. And so what happened was, I remember one incident happened, and I was trying to get away. And I remember one night I ended up getting up and I walked in my bedclothes to the hospital because I needed to be seen. It was that bad. And it was 4 in the morning, and all I could say is God covered me because I was in the neighborhood I did not know at 4 in the morning, and I walked about 5 miles to a hospital. When I got there, they checked me out. They said, you're dehydrated. You need to be. So at that point, I was just like, I can't go home. Not because they wouldn't welcome me back, but because my pride said, I want to sit here on my own, and I don't want to have to go back. I'm out here, and I've let so much go, and you know, so I ended up coming back. I called my mom. I actually spoke to my mother-in-law, and she told me, you need to go back. You need to go back home. And I called my mom. She came and got me, and that was only the beginning of a back and forth because there was a stronghold. There was a soul tie there, but it was also a stronghold of a back and forth, back and forth. And I knew that I was going to have to leave one day. I just knew that off the bat, that this is not going to last. Like most marriages, you hope it's going to last forever. Mm-hmm. I knew that ones are going to last, but it was embarrassment of feeling like I've gotten married. People know that, and my marriage is failing, and I just didn't know how I feel about that because my parents had they're married almost 30 years. And I just felt like I failed, if I was going to leave it, so it was back and forth, back and forth. I went through a period when I came back where we ended up being homeless. We ended up moving to Georgia. Things didn't work out there. Came back, ended up coming back, and I missed home anyway. So I want to come back home to my family because I'm close to my family. And so all this time, me and my mom had been communicating, and she was praying for me, and I knew she was praying for me because some situations that I had gotten myself into, I just know that was nothing but her prayers that kept me through because I knew she was the only person that probably was praying for me at the time. So when I came back home, that's when we were homeless at that point, and I went through a period of just wondering at this point what is going on in my life, because I don't know how I got here, like how did I get from being in a stable home to now I'm homeless with a man that is abusive, you know what I'm saying? So I want to say back in it was 2018, an incident happened where the police had gotten involved, and was taken away for a time. And at that point in my life, I felt like I just was doing my own thing. I was on my own officially for the first time because he was in jail, and I didn't really know what path I was on. I knew that my mom would call me and she was like, "Oh, you're not living the way that I raised you. It's not how I raised you." And I had to hear that. I'm like, "Okay, mom, I know. And eventually, we tried to make things work once he got back out, and it didn't work because I just felt like too much damage had happened at that point, and it was hard to feel like somebody that um, had done all that damage. How could we go forward? You know what I'm saying? With acting like nothing happened, and it was a significant amount of damage that had been done because there was some therapy that had to take place as well. So I ended up moving back home in 2019. And when I moved back home, my parents were like, we just want you back. And that's been their whole thing this whole time. We just want you back. It's okay. You can come back here. You're safe. You could be safe here. And I think at that point, I was done. There was nothing else there more for me. And I really had come to a point where I realized this is not going to get any better. And I just need to come home. So when I came home, I was a mess. I was a mess. Mentally, I was a mess. And I was just like, I don't even know why I'm even here at this point. I have been through all that hurt. Why am I still here? What is God going to do with me? And I'm just broken like this. You know what I'm saying? And not long after, I got pregnant with my daughter. And I feel like that saved me because it gave me some type of a purpose in my life to care for somebody else. It made me feel like it's worth being here still, And that pregnancy was not easy. Me and my mom, we went back and forth a lot, but I feel like it was more of a spiritual fight because I was trying to let go of something that my mind was already gone, but my heart was still there, And it was a fight, a stronghold for a while, and eventually I started coming back to church because I've been going to New Covenant since I was about 2 or 3. And during that time I had got married, I left. I had been gone for those years, so I ended up coming back, and I started getting back under the word and everything like that. And I I think over time, I just kind of, God has built me back up in the place. And my mom told me, she said, God gave me a dream. He showed me that I was in the same room with her at her home, and she said, you had on this ivory or very shiny like pajamas, and she said that I said to her, she said, Mom, look. And she said she was annoyed with me about something I did. I guess aggravated. And she said that God told her to look. And when she looked at me, she saw me I was just glowing. And I had on this glowing pajamas. And she said that God told her that I'm going to restore your daughter. So at the time when she told me that, I was staying with my mom at the time. I had moved back in and everything like that. And there were some things going on. I just said, Lord, I just really need a place for me and my kids. I need a space for us. And so I started serving him, and he opened up a door just this past year for me to get my own place. And since I've moved in, I have done nothing but share. I get on TikTok and I share videos to try to encourage other women, because I feel like it's one of the things that is not talked about a lot, where women will go through things like that. They feel ashamed that they don't want to talk about it because they feel like they're the only ones going through it. So he's used that to not only strengthen me, but he's healed me. He's healed my mind. He's healed my heart, because I was in a very broken place for a long time, and I wouldn't even talk about it because I was just so embarrassed. I was ashamed, and I was just like, if I tell people this, they're gonna think so many things. But the in him taking the fear of what people think about me is driven me more into sharing the message, because I've been raised on the word my whole life. And I told my mom at one point, because my mom would always try to keep us from going through things. And I would tell her, I want my own testament. I don't want yours. If you tell me how good God is, I'm never going to, I know what the word says, but I don't know him for myself. Mm-hmm. And in the time that I was going through this now, I worship every day. And when I'm at my worship, I cry because I'm just like, I know that was nobody but you that got me through it. I was in a situation that we talk about it constantly, where I could have lost my mind, because it was a point where I was getting, I was speaking into a lawyer was helping me at the time when I was in my situation. And she was like, I need you to tell me what happened, because she was going to represent me. And she said, I need you to tell me what happened, and I need you to tell me everything that happened, because at this point the state was building a case against him. And she said, I need you to tell me everything. And I told her, and she was just like, I've never heard anything that, disturbing before. She said, I've heard women say they've been pushed and, shoved, but I've never heard anybody say anything like that. And so she said, you may need to seek some type of PTSD counseling. And so I said, okay. And I said, well, what is that for? She said, well, this is what they're going to do. And these are the type of options. I can't, she said, I'm not a medical professional, but I could just, So they were wanting to shock my brain, a certain part of my brain, so I would forget certain things. And when I realized that certain things like depression, anxiety they're demons, because they just torment. And I got to a place where I was trying to figure out, how am I going to live, with some of these memories, you know what I'm saying? And then I realized my mom said, only thing you can do is trust God. She said, don't let them do nothing to your brain, because you might come out as not knowing who you are. So I was like, okay. And I was like, well, she don't understand. She doesn't understand from what I've experienced. And there were some things I purposely did not tell her, because I know as a mother, I'm a mother. I would never want my daughter to experience anything like that. So I'm not going to, I'm going to spare her some details, you know what I'm saying? And so she was like, no, you just got to trust God. And I would hear people say, God help me with depression and anxiety. I'm just like, yeah, I hear you. And then I experienced that he did do that. So I have not had any shock therapy, and he's taken that away from me. Now you'll have the memories, but they don't affect me the same way they used to. And I tell people now, I could see my ex-husband now, and I would show the love of Christ in him. I have no bitterness in my heart. I've moved forward. I'm seeing the glory of God. I know people were telling me the other day, say, your skin is glowing. I said, that's the glory of God right now. It's the best skincare you ever have. Mm-hmm. But he's done a work in my life. And like I said, my mission at this point is to help other women. I want to minister to them mostly, because like I said, you're not alone. God will get you through it. There is no medication that they can give you. There is no therapy that you're going to get. Because with therapy, they'll look at you crazy and they'll write you off a prescription at the end of the day. They don't give you much help besides that. And even after you pour out what you've dealt with, it may be a burden for the next person, you know. So I would encourage anybody to take those, you know, concerns in prayer. You know, God does heal. Because He healed me, because I was a mess. I was really a mess. I just want to say, I know the biggest thing for me that I used to feel like is, how do I walk away, knowing I invested in someone else, for the betterment of, you know, for them, you know. And I think sometimes, that can keep people in a situation they have no business being in. But I want to say, just trust God. He will get you through. Pray to Him. There is no better person that you can go to pour out your heart. Because I always say, you know, when you go to man and you tell them what's going on in your life, there's no guarantee that's going to stay there in the room. They'll get mad at you and they'll start sharing your business with the next person. But you can confide in God, and He's gonna see you through. Um, I know another thing too that I just wanted to share, that was a biggest disappointment, was that, I felt like I was betrayed, because this is somebody, like, see, my dad, um, he's always been a role model for me growing up. Now, I have my biological dad, but I don't really know. I know him, but we never really had a relationship. So my dad that you see, that's my dad. He raised me. But he's always been a role model for me, um, to show what a man should be. So I was, as a kid, you know, I was kind of wanted to mimic that. And I felt like, okay, well, then I'll fit somebody here. But there's a difference when you have somebody that's God sent, because that person's going to care after your heart the way God would. Um, so I was disappointed, because I felt this person's supposed to protect me, you know, and I tried to paint him for somebody he wasn't. And I said, you know, well, um, you know, he's got potential. And I fell in love with potential, but you can't fall in love with potential. Potential does nothing, you know. So that was one of the things that kept me in it. And a lot of people feel like, well, I have to stay with this person because nobody else want me. Nobody else will want me broken, you know. But God will send the right person at the right time. And He'll send that person when you're ready for them, not before. Not anytime, not a minute before you're ready. Um, but I would say this: if you are seeking, and everybody has wants to be with somebody, I would say to seek God first and fall in love with Him first. Um, Go devoted with Him, spend time with Him, and don't leave him behind, because he feels like you're gonna leave him up for somebody else. He ain't gonna send him. Just, you know.